Hello everyone and welcome to session 3. Today's schedule is going to be just a little bit different. The session 3 class is going to be posted as usual at 10 a.m. and then at 1 p.m. I will be getting on IG Live to do the session 3 Q&A. Then in case you want to get ready for proofing and baking tomorrow morning, session 4 will be posted also today at 3 p.m. Tomorrow morning we'll do our last IG Live Q&A and that'll be at 9 a.m. Many of you very kind people have reached out and asked about supporting the bake shop and asked about donations. This class was of course designed to be a free class and there's absolutely no pressure, but since some of you have reached out, I've decided to add a donation button to our online croissant class page. 100% of these donations will go directly to my staff, not to me or the bake shop. So if you enjoyed the class and feel like making a contribution, go to coilsbakeshop.com and click on the online croissant class link at the top of the page. Thank you again for watching. I really hope you're enjoying the class and I can't wait to see your croissants. Happy baking. Hello, welcome to session 3. Today we are going to sheet out the dough and then cut and shape our pastries. This is my dough that has been resting overnight. In the last video I went over some options, but just to give you information about this particular piece of dough, I did my third turn yesterday afternoon and then I put it in the freezer for about 4 hours so that the yeast activity stopped, and then I moved it in the fridge overnight. And so now we're going to roll this piece of dough out and cut our pastries. And I'm going to very awkwardly unwrap it for you. Okay. Now, before you sheet out, it is a good idea to take a look at this shaping guide, which is near the end of your packet, and decide which of the options you want. If you want to do these triangles for regular plain croissants, or if you want to do these rectangular shapes for the pain au chocolat. Both of them are going to use this size piece of dough, of course, but one of them is going to be a little longer and narrower. This one's going to be a little shorter and fatter. I'm going to take it to somewhere in between because I'm actually going to cut the piece in half and do half plain croissants and half pain au chocolat. But it is a good idea at this stage to have your ruler handy and have kind of a sense of where you want to go with your pastries. To start though, I'm just going to work on getting this bigger. So I'm going to liberally flour my bench and the top, and then this is going to look familiar to you. I'm going to do my pressing. So again, I'm feeling the dough, getting it kind of flexible, and I'm also making sure that those layers stay nicely stacked on top. Now it's normal for this looks like it's cracking just a little bit on the outside. It's just doing that because that external layer is quite cold and it's not anything you need to worry about. Okay, so we've gotten this pressed into a nice flat-ish rectangular shape, and we're gonna continue with our rolling. This is all gonna look pretty familiar. It's gonna look a lot like the first turn. The only difference is your dough is gonna be a lot more stable now that it's had 3 turns. So I'm gonna start at the end and roll forward. I'm gonna switch rolling pins because I like this one better. Okay, going about to the middle there and still pulling those corners out as needed. Then I'm going to start on the other end and work my way a couple inches at a time towards the middle. Now it's normal with the sheet out to need to do it in a couple of stages, especially if you're working with dough by hand. This is a physically demanding dough, and if you haven't guessed it already, I'm also up on my tiptoes for this one, so I can get some leverage. Someday I'll have a shorter counter, but for now, this is my strategy. Okay, so I've gotten this nice and long, and at this stage, I'm actually gonna move some things out of the way. I'm gonna rotate it and get it a little bit wider as well. We do want to make sure that this looks pretty even before we rotate it, otherwise we'll get different widths when we go to turn the dough. So I'm actually going to check this one last time and go back and forth, getting this nice and even. Okay. now we can rotate it, and then we're gonna work section by section. And we wanna keep our dough as even as possible because we're not weighing this dough. We're cutting it and rolling it up. And so it's important that the dough stay at an even thickness because if we have thicker and thinner parts of the dough, we'll of course have much larger and smaller pastries. Your dough should always be sort of moving freely. So if you ever find that it's sticking, you want to make sure to stop and get some more flour underneath because we don't want to tear these layers if they're sticking to the bench. So what I like to do is just gently pick up my dough and then toss some flour underneath. Okay, and I find that at this stage, before my dough warms up too much, I kind of toggle back and forth between rolling widthwise and lengthwise. Because what will happen is that gluten will relax in one direction or it'll get stretched in one direction and then it won't want to stretch any longer. So you have to move in the other direction. And then once it rests a little bit going this way, we can turn the dough back and get a little more length. So this is our dough. It's nice and even. Sometimes it's helpful actually to go ahead and look at it from the side and actually feel with your fingers. It's really hard to be able to tell from sort of a top-down look where things are thick and thin. So always kind of checking and getting some physical feedback is helpful as far as determining where your dough actually is. At this stage, we're gonna stop and we're gonna rest the dough for a little bit before we shape it. Okay, I'm taking off any extra flour, and then I want to take the flour off the bottom as well. So I'm going to do that by rolling it up onto the pin. So pick up your dough, roll it over, and see how floury it is on that side? That's going to cause cracks, going to dry and cause cracks in the dough if we don't take it off before we rest the dough. So we want to be meticulous. And I think too, there's a tendency to handle your croissant dough really gingerly, and it's important to really, get in there and not just like gently take this off, but really get that flour off. So I'm just taking that all off as I roll. This dough is looking nice. Okay, I have prepared a sheet pan with a piece of parchment, and I'm going to just unroll this onto the parchment, and then I've got an extra little piece here so that I can fold it back on itself without it sticking. Okay, so there's our sheeted out dough. I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap and sort of tuck in those edges. Might have some that I can reuse. And then this is going to go in the fridge for at least an hour before we cut and shape the pastries. You'll notice that I didn't measure it at this stage. I had a sort of eyeball sense of how big it was, but mostly we're going to be doing adjustments before we actually do our final cut. So it doesn't matter too much what the exact proportions are at this stage. So this is going to go in the fridge, and we'll come back to it in a little bit.